And here we go with part 2 of my interview with Nik Harter. So there are some things in the world. There's the outside world, and cannabis absolutely can affect them. So we're going to go through a few of these. The first one is music. Mm-hmm. How does it change your perception of music?
Oh, man. I love music so much, and I'm a terrible dancer, but I love to dance, and I love to play music really loud in my car and on my bike, and I'll move my body and look like an idiot. I don't care. And weed helps me just do that even more. I don't know. Music is awesome when I'm stoned. It's so good, and yeah, I'll be more likely to sing. I'll be more likely to move my body because I feel like I feel it in my bones more, it just resonates more with me, and whatever emotion is in the song, I'm just picking up that emotion 3 times as much when I'm stoned, and that's why I love music, because music, talk about something that can snap you out of it or, calm you down, the big one is music.
Yeah, music soothes even the savage beast. What about... And I think a lot of us need that. I think we need that thing to allow us to open up a little bit more, to move and dance and just, open up.
Yeah.
What about the music itself? When you listen to the music, do you listen more to the actual music or the lyrics, or what is that like?
I think I do notice lyrics a little bit more at times, where... I wish I could think of a specific example, but there is this one song that it's called Sirens, and I thought that it was sirens, like the sirens that call boats in from the sea, because I just wasn't really, it has a really nice melody, it's a beautiful song, and I wasn't paying too much attention to the lyrics, I guess, because I listened a little closer when I was stoned one time and realized that the sirens, when they're like, sirens on the way, they're talking about police cars, and these guys are running from the police and stuff. And it was funny because all the protests were happening and stuff, and I was like, wow, this song's a lot more relevant to what's happening in my life right now than I thought it was. But I think it helps me notice lyrics more, and it helps me I'll often, with that song, I understood the actual meaning of the song for the first time, but other times I'll see alternate meanings, where it'll help me interpret a song in a new way.
Yeah, that's really cool, and I think that's similar to the creativity thing. You're looking at it from another perspective that your sober brain might not have.
Yeah, totally. It is totally it's the same or similar. Yeah.
So what about movies and TV shows? Do those change in your brain? Do you look at them a different way when you're high?
I don't watch movies or TV shows not high, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, you're not the first one to say that.
Yeah, I couldn't actually tell you the last time that I watched a movie or TV show not stoned, because that is something that I tend to do in the evenings, and most evenings I'm stoned. And a lot of things used to be like this for me, where I was I wouldn't eat unless I was stoned. Instead, I was everything I had to be stoned first, because being stoned does make everything better. But movies and TV is still one of those few remaining things where if I'm planning on watching a TV show or movie, my reflex is instantly just oh, where the reefer at, So maybe that's how it's changed that experience for me, is just that if I am going to watch TV, I will also be smoking weed, I don't know. But
are there any TV shows or movies that you had seen before or knew really well before sober, and then you watched them high, and did they change at all?
Have you ever seen the movie Waking Life?
Oh boy, yes.
Yeah.
I could go on for a long time about that movie.
Okay, sure, yeah. So that movie is it's an animated movie. It's animated in this weird oil paint style, would you say, or it's just kind of realistic?
It's it's all digital, but it's the animation style is rotoscope animation.
There you go.
Which is something that I actually dabble in.
Cool.
But it's all in the computers. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but yes, it has a very interesting visual look to it, and it changes because they had a bunch of different artists.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I've seen that movie maybe 3 or 4 times. I've never finished it, and I watched it stoned. like most of those times except for once, and I would usually fall asleep at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one time when I tried to watch it sober, and I don't think I made it through. I made it through like the first quarter. I mean, of course I didn't make it through, but I made it through the first quarter of the movie, and it was just, I don't know, it was too heady, man. I could not get into the heady space. It's a good movie. It is a good movie, but
You were high at this time?
no,
this viewing?
when I was sober, it was too heady for me, and it was just like, oh man, am I really gonna sit through another hour and a half of this? I don't know. But this could also have more to do with the fact that like watching things not high is a very rare occurrence for me.
Yeah, that movie is very heady anyway.
Right,
And
yeah.
so, for those who have never seen it, first of all, you should definitely go watch it. Visually, it's beautiful. The music is amazing. And then the mental concepts that they're talking about will just make you think of things that you haven't really thought about. And yeah, sober or high, I don't think it matters. But yeah, I think it is sort of hard for some people to watch it sober because it is so heady. But I think you can, if you're high, you can maybe actually get into it a little bit better.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree with that. Yeah, even though I didn't make it through the movie when I was high, I would always fall asleep. That had more to do with it just being late at night, and it was more. Yeah, I felt like it was easier to access that sort of like philosophical, heady space when I was stoned, and that movie actually, probably because I fell asleep during it like 2 or 3 times, but it changed the way I dream. Or rather, it gave me certain kinds of dreams, because the plot of that movie is, I think that the main character is in a dream, or he just like, he thinks that he's in a dream, or no, excuse me. So he's in a dream, and every time he thinks he wakes up, he's in another dream again and doesn't realize it, and like goes through the same, goes through a different set of circumstances, adventures. And I started having dreams like that, where I would realize that I was dreaming, and I would try and wake up, and I would wake up and I'd be in my room, and I'd be like, oh, thank God I'm awake. And I'd like get up and like go brush my teeth or something, and there'd be this, man-sized praying mantis behind me or something. I'd be like, oh shit. And then I'd like wake up again, and I'm like, back home at my folks' house in my bed or something. A lot of times I would wake up in my bed. It's like my brain was purposely fooling me.
Right.
But anyway, it wasn't until recently, actually, like this last year, because I haven't had one of those dreams for a while, and I put it together. I was like, I think I started having those dreams after I started watching Waking Life, where it was just like, couldn't escape the dream, man.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what that movie is about. It's crazy that your brain just decided to like pick that up. A lot of what that movie is about, or at least a portion of it, is about lucid dreaming, which
Yes.
I think has gotten a lot more play and exposure in recent years. Is that something that you've experienced, being able to control your dream while you're dreaming?
Yeah, so yeah, and actually at the time when I was having these dreams, I was more into it. I used to do the little tricks to cause yourself to lucid dream, which got popular after the movie Inception came out.
Mm-hmm.
So one that I did was I drew an A on my hand in Sharpie, and if the A wasn't there, like I would just make sure that I'd look at my hand periodically throughout the day. And then when you're asleep, your brain kind of just does the same things. So when I would look at my hand, if there was no A on it, then I knew I was in a dream. But having like a black A on your hand is like kind of weird. So I changed to finger counting, because when you count your fingers in a dream, you have more than 5 fingers usually. So I would count my fingers regularly during the day, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then at night when I was dreaming, I would try counting my fingers and be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm dreaming. Yeah. But that's for sure also part of why I was having those kind of like waking life dreams. Yeah, because I was kind of practicing lucid dreaming. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. We won't go into like dreams because that's a whole different topic. But
It is.
Something that I actually haven't asked people is how does cannabis affect your sleep?
Yeah, well, it's kind of sad because I definitely dream less when I smoke.
Mm-hmm.
And I think especially with how I smoke now, which is again more in the evenings, I dream less than I used to. And I still keep a dream journal. I have a very extensive dream journal, but it affects my dreams a lot. I dream a lot less when I smoke, which is a little bit of a bummer, I'm not going to lie. But it also helps me get to sleep big time, big time. And sometimes I'll wake up with a little bit of like a weed hangover, like a little groggy, but I don't really mind that, honestly. It really bothers a lot of people, but I don't really mind it. Like, I don't know. I feel like I wake up kind of relaxed a little bit, but yeah, it does make it harder to remember my dreams, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's better to have a little bit of a weed hangover than a alcohol hangover.
Oh yeah, 100% and 100%. And I find that it usually fades away, and I don't know. I don't mind it. I also, like I'll do my little routine. Like I mentioned, I meditate and stuff. So I'll usually like exercise and meditate in the mornings, and that kind of like resets me too. So maybe that's part of it.
Yeah,
too.
that'll get you going.
Yeah, yeah.
So you mentioned food before. What is your experience of food like when you're high? Do you notice the food different? Does it taste different to you?
Yeah, I notice it more. And I love food. Food for me is such an important moment of like kicking back and relaxing. And, so is pot. And I just notice it a whole lot more. I actually have to be careful when I'm high. I have to be more mindful of eating slowly because food it can be so good that I'll just like snarf it down,
Right.
And I want to take my time to enjoy it. Yeah, because flavors pop more, and and at the same time, I crave more extreme flavors. So I'll be putting like hot sauce on my barbecue sauce or whatever, like the spicy and the sweet and the salty and all the things. And it's funny because you would think that if I'm more sensitive to flavors, I wouldn't need as much, but no,
Right.
like I'm more sensitive and I want all the flavors. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like that anyway. I just love flavor. Like I put hot sauce on so many things anyway.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Sauces are key. Sauces and gravies.
That's what it's all about. That's what
Yeah.
it's all about.
Yeah.
What about the munchies? You said that when you were in your friend's treehouse, you guys really got the munchies. Is that something that you still experience?
I mean, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I think if I'm not careful, I can just eat endlessly. Munchies is for sure something that I experience. And actually there's a chemical that's released in your brain at night. I can't remember what it's called. That is sort of like having the munchies. So sometimes your appetite will grow late at night. I'm talking like past like 10 or 11. And that is also often when I'm stoned. So the munchies can be a powerful like combining force there. And
How do you deal with that?
how do I deal with it? I deal with it by portioning. Like I'm like, okay, you're gonna make one trip to the kitchen and you're gonna get everything that you're gonna eat in this one trip, and then you're done. And my plate will be like a freaking mountain or whatever, and I'll be like carrying a bag of chips under my arm or something. But yeah, that's that. I'll just like try to like everything on this plate is what I'm eating, then I'm done, and that usually works out okay. I always have chocolate in my room,
Yeah.
so I'll usually like nibble on that. But
Yeah, it's a lot about self-control. And some
Yeah.
days you don't really want to have any self-control, and you're just like, I'm just gonna eat whatever I feel like.
yeah, 100%, and yeah, weed definitely helps me get there when I want to be there as well.
So this next topic, you actually already brought it up briefly before. It's a sensitive topic, so if go into as much or as little detail as you want, but it's all about sex.
Sure, cool.
What's sex like when you're high?
Time definitely slows down, which is nice. And the normal, like, good tingly sensations that I get are just even more so, right? And you would think that, I mean, so the thing, I'm a male identifying person in a male body, etc.
Right.
Have a penis. So you would think the goal is to usually to not climax so quickly, right? As the penis owner, and you'd think perhaps that like weed would makes me more sensitive, so I might be climaxing faster, right? But not though, and that's why I feel like weed and sex are just so meant to be. Is because I feel like the tingly, all like the sexy sensations that are awesome, and it'll make me like, I'm gonna get graphic now, but it'll make me like fuck slower, because I don't need to like be pounding it out or whatever,
Right,
because
right.
it feels good at a slower rhythm sometimes, and it'll make me kind of like experiment a little bit more too, I guess, yeah, I find that it gives me more control over my orgasm, which is a godsend. It's like truly, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the thing about, well, I guess with a lot of these topics, there's the physical side and there's the mental side.
Right.
For food, for instance, the physical side is how it tastes, but then the mental side is maybe like what your brain is interpreting the taste or how you feel about it or whatever. Same with music, right?
Yeah.
But with this one, what sort of are there mental feelings that come along with that, with sex specifically?
Like, I don't know, speak more towards that. So it's like what's actually happening versus like what I think about what's happening.
Yeah, or just like what's the mental state? What are you thinking about? Or is that any different? I guess is the point than when you're sober. Is your mental state changed at all in the act of sex?
Mm-hmm.
There's the physical side, but then there's the mental side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I'm more self-conscious and I'm more like aware of my own body a lot of the time. And I think the best sex that I've had while stoned, that was not the case because I was with someone who I cared about a lot and was super comfortable with. And it was total just like, soul body meld. But I think that usually it will make me think more about the fact that I'm naked and like what exactly I'm doing and where I'm putting my hands and like, how hard I'm doing this or kissing or doing whatever it is, and maybe that's why it gives me a little bit more control too, because it does put me a little bit more in my head. But at the same time, I also feel more. So it almost like expands my capacity for perception a little bit, I guess. So it's like I can be both like feeling more physical sensations and at the same time be a little bit more in my head about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say it brings it back to focus, which I think a lot of these actually, it comes back to your focus. It can be either razor sharp or it can be more broad at the same time, which is really weird.
And I'll say that, I mean, even when I'm not stoned and having sex, but certainly when I'm stoned and having sex, the goal is certainly to be present and like get out of my head, and that's when sex and cannabis really become like amazing.
Yeah. So moving on a little bit, do you think that your view of the world has changed at all since you started getting high when you were younger?
Yeah, so, I think this is going to be different with weed culture for kids nowadays, but I think it just made me more rebellious. My parents were really strict about pot smoking when I was younger, right? And not as strict about alcohol, not nearly as strict. And so I think this happens with a lot of stoners, especially stoners from back in the days when pot was legal in all states and stuff, or illegal in all states, excuse me. That it made me question things. Like it made me question authority in general, and certainly my parents, where it's like, what do you really know about pot and how dangerous it is when like you're not really upset about me drinking, but you're not okay with me smoking pot, And then they'll be like, oh, well, it's just because it's illegal. And then I look into that. It's like, well, why is pot illegal? This is ridiculous, And then I think it made me more likely to be rebellious and questioning like different kinds of authority and whatnot. And I'm actually really curious to see if that'll be the case with like young stoners now who are coming up in a world where weed is legal. If smoking pot engenders the same kind of like questioning of authority, but yeah, it definitely did for me. I'm sorry, I can't even remember what the original question is now, but
No, that's fine. I was actually going to ask a follow-up anyway,
please,
but
please.
yeah, I do think that it is going to change because obviously the stigma against cannabis has been lessening and lessening every year with more states legalizing it. And then just the fact that more people are realizing that it's not the thing that they were trying to make us think it was all those decades ago, that people are finally can put that away and be like, oh, it's not that. And not only is it not that thing, but it is also better and safer than alcohol, or at least for most people it is.
Yeah.
And nobody's ever died from it. So yeah, I think the views on that specifically are definitely going to change over the years. And then the question was just, how has your view of the world changed since you've started getting high? You know, not just with looking at cannabis specifically, but you know, just the world in general. Do you, you know, and maybe because you started at such a young age,
Yeah.
maybe that is a little bit harder to figure out.
It is kind of hard to determine like how my view of the world changed.
Do you ever learn like insights? Are there any, you know, on a certain day, do you ever realize something because you were high?
High on mushrooms, maybe. No, I mean, I'm sure I'm sure I've had important realizations when I'm stoned. Nothing immediately jumps out at me except for that oftentimes, like sometimes I'll get into mind states where just I have like a lot of ideas and I'll be like writing a bunch of notes on my phone. And I'll just have a ton of my ideas. It's like my brain's just throwing them at me. And I'm usually stoned when I have those moments. It's like a more regular thing. I don't have a specific story, but yeah, you know, it's again, it's hard to say how it might have changed my view of the world because I really did grow up with it, and I grew up in California, you know, and this was another thing that I would tell my parents, but I'd be like, it's just part of the culture here, you don't understand. I was very rebellious.
In terms of just pot and cannabis in general, do you consider yourself a pot nerd or a connoisseur? Do you care about what sort of strains you're getting, or are you not as knowledgeable about that?
I consider myself a pot nerd. I consider myself a pot connoisseur. I've grown weed a couple times. I do not care that much anymore about what strains I smoke. I prefer indica, but I prefer to get lots of weed and have it in excess, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of spilling weed because when I had less money and I had to be super sparing with my weed, you know, I remember those times very well. So it gives me a lot of satisfaction to be able to use weed in excess, like spill it sometimes a little bit. But to get back to your question, I mean, I feel like I know a lot about pot and pot culture. You know, I've been deep in it for like a decade now, and or more than a decade. And it's funny because I really don't care too much about which specific strain I'm smoking these days. Mm-hmm. When I used to have a medical card, when I first turned 18 for a few years, I had my favorite strains, and we would go out to all the clubs in the city, because the first time that you went to a club, they would give you something for free. So me and my best friend we would just like go from club to club on days that we had free and stuff and get free pot. But yeah, and at that point I had preferences as far as specific strains, and now I feel more like the reason that I would call myself a pot connoisseur is more just because, like, I don't know, I just know a lot about it. I've grown it. I know all the stages of its growth. I know a lot about a lot of the slang terms.
You have to be pretty knowledgeable to grow it and to know what you're doing.
You know, you do and you don't. Like, you can just despite what you'll read online, because no guide to growing pot will tell you this, but you can just put a seed in the ground or like sprout a seed and then put it in the dirt and it will grow. But if you want to have like anything resembling those dense nugs that you'll get from a club or dispensary, then you have to do the things. You have to get lights, you have to get fertilizer, you have to, trim it or whatever, prune it.
Yeah. So you can do it. Anybody could do it, but if you want to do it, a certain way, you do have to become more knowledgeable. You had said earlier that you prefer indica.
Yeah.
The typical feeling that they say is that indica will make you more chilled out, and sativa will make you a little bit more head high and uppity. Do you feel that in you, or do you feel something different?
I definitely feel that. And I think that for me, on balance, I tend to be a little bit more operating at kind of like a blah, blah, blah level than a like a wah, wah, wah level. And sativa does not help me sleep nearly as much, for example. If I smoke sativa, it'll be more likely to be put me in that headspace where I'm like, oh man, that's a cool idea. I'm going to write that down. Oh, that's a cool idea. I'm going to write that down. And yeah, I definitely notice a difference between the two. A lot of times I'm smoking hybrids, so it's a little more subtle and the experience is a little more mixed. But yeah, I feel like indica helps me be a little bit more on that like wah, wah, wah level and not so on the da, 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 da.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna have to use those sounds going forward that you made. Yeah, and I think that makes sense that if you're a person who tends to be more high energy anyway, then you need that balance.
Yeah.
To balance it out.
Big time. Yeah, CBD is actually really great for that too.
Okay. Yeah. The CBD is interesting these days because it's so prevalent. You can get it in so many places now, which is just weird. But I also think that a lot of companies are not putting they're not putting as much in there as they say they are, or the amount is not really anything that is going to do anything. So, this is to the listeners, the little bit that I know is if you do want to go get something like that, make sure that it's coming from a reputable source and that it actually has what it claims to have, and it's going to do what it's going to do. Don't waste your money on anything. You probably know more about that than I do.
So that's absolutely true. Generally, if you buy CBD products from a club or dispensary, then they'll be
legit.
Yeah, they'll be legit. When you buy CBD products from like a grocery store or a drugstore or something, that CBD is made from hemp, and so it's just CBD. There's not even like trace amounts of THC in it, really. Like maybe trace, but like not really. And CBD that you get at dispensaries tends to have a little bit more THC and tends to have a more robust set of, they're called cannabinoids and terpenes. Told you I was weed nerd, but and they'll have a more robust set of these like things that get you not stoned, but affect your mind and body in like more subtle ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's something that we're still learning about as a society is what are all of these things in there and what do they do? But from what I understand, they work together. And when you get rid of all those other ones and you just have the CBD, it's not necessarily going to do what it needs to do. You actually do need some of those other things, or small amounts of those other things. And yeah.
Yeah, you can't see me, but I'm nodding my head like, yeah, that's right. That's exactly it. Yeah.
The visual medium is lacking. If you look at your life and you look at how much pot is a part of your life, what does that look like to you? Is there a percentage of how much of it's a part of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it is 25 to 33% of my life, because I am about that percent of the time stoned.
Good way to figure it out.
Yeah, right. Kind of literal, but it does. Maybe it's a little larger of a percent just because I do, and I think probably because I've been smoking pot for so long. It's definitely part of my identity. And even in times when I'm smoking less pot, which is not right now, I'll still, I'll tell people I'm a stoner, and I will always tell people that. So maybe a little bit larger of a percentage, because of that. Yeah.
Maybe someday I'll create a math formula that, factors in all these different things, and then you can combine them to figure out, your percentage of how much pot is in your life.
Yeah.
Do you think your feelings towards it have changed over the years?
I think, yeah. I think for sure. Yeah, a lot. I was like every day, all day type of stoner for many years. And then I took my first like longer break from smoking pot. And I've actually seen other people experience this exact same thing where they'll smoke basically every day for many years, and they'll take their first break. And then when they come back to it, it's different. And that definitely happened to me. And it was different in the way where it wasn't always chill anymore. Sometimes like it was such a part of my life, I guess, before that it pretty much always just made me feel better and more relaxed. And then when I took that first break, which was really only 2 or 3 weeks, and I must have been 19 or 20, and I came back to it, and all of a sudden sometimes I would smoke pot and like not have a good time. I'd be like paranoid or just too in my head, or yeah, which was weird. So it definitely changed my perspective on it when I realized that like it was hard for me to understand people that didn't enjoy pot before. Like I did get it, but I didn't really get it. I was understanding of it, but I didn't really get it. And then I like got it. I was like, oh, this is what, like my friend Jesse, he ended up not really being a huge fan of cannabis. And I thought of him, because like, oh, this must be what Jesse feels like when he smokes pot. Interesting. And I since then, has my like perspective of it changed, or attitude towards it changed? I don't know. I think,
let's look at the future. What do you think your future with it will be like?
I think that it will. I really do think that it will always be part of my life, and to one degree or another. And I certainly go through phases where I'm smoking more and smoking less. Right now I'm smoking more. This goes back to one of your first questions about, if I had to choose one, alcohol or weed, and it'd definitely be cannabis, because, it's kinder on my body. I like the way it makes me think a lot of the time. It just seems less destructive in a lot of ways. It seems a lot safer. And I'm really glad that I'm growing up in a time where I remember when I was a kid, people would always say like, oh, you're into pot now, but you'll grow out of it, and even as I started becoming an adult, I heard that a lot from adults who were like, oh, I used to be into pot, but then I grew out of it. And I always thought that was kind of BS. It's like, well, did you, for the same reason, it was like, well, did you grow out of booze? No, you still like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to grow out of cannabis. Mm-hmm. And I don't foresee myself ever not appreciating and enjoying it.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of people have sort of grown out of it because of the legal reasons that up until recently that it was illegal all over the place?
Yeah. I think that when people say, oh, you'll grow out of it, what they meant was some version of like, oh, at some point, you'll be too sketched out to use cannabis, or it was just and also when it was illegal, it was associated, like if you were a pot smoker, it was like you were a pot smoker, and that was definitely like a really big part of your identity, and I think maybe that had a lot to do with the fact that it was illegal. And I think that is perhaps also why when people got older, it's like, oh, well, I'm not really like a big pot smoker or whatever, And, people get jobs where they get drug tested, and then you have to stop smoking. And then I think a lot of people have that experience like what happened to me, where they'll smoke a lot when they're younger. They'll have that first break from it, and then they come back, and it's different all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we change just physically and mentally as we get older. I mean, I know I'm not the same person that I was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And, your relationship with alcohol or pot or whatever is going to change along with that. I mean, It's kind of unavoidable.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, and the other thing I was going to say, you sort of touched on it, is a lot of people also need to become an adult, a responsible adult. And so, smoking pot was, when they were younger, was probably a form of rebellion. And then you let that go. But like you said, they also don't usually quit alcohol, which is similar, but almost worse in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, arguably. And you actually touched on a key point there, because there's this idea that that I think is now fading out of the culture, but there is this idea that you can't be like a responsible grown-up person if you're also a pot smoker. Like all pot smokers are reprobate, lazy hippies or something, you know, and that's obviously not the case. And I think that's just becoming more and more apparent to the point where it's not even an issue in places where it's legal now.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the next 5 or 10 years with that.
Yeah, I think the culture is going to change a lot, I think.
And my last question is, what do you want to say to pot? You know, if it were in the room with you right now, well, it probably is. But what do you want to say to it?
Oh, just thank you. Just thank you so much. Such a gift to the earth. And I can't wait until we discover more out about it, like about all these different random molecules, all the cannabinoids and terpenes and whatnot that are in it that could have really important medical benefits. I'm very excited for the future of cannabis and what she has to bring to the world. I mean, and thank you so personally for what you've done in my own life and the relief that you've shown me, speaking of cannabis. And I'm so excited for what she has yet to reveal to us.
And if you were not able to enjoy pot anymore for whatever reason, is there anything that you would want it to know or her to know, to use your words?
Yeah. I don't, I mean, yeah, her or him is an interesting question, but, sorry, is there anything I would want her to know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than your appreciativeness.
No, just that she's loved. Yeah, that's it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's a good place to end.
Cool.
You haven't heard it yet, but in a couple of weeks, the episode with that question will be airing, and it's one of my favorites just because I love hearing people express their love for it.
Yeah.
And they've said very similar things to what you said, which is just you've really helped me and helped a lot of other people, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a good question to end the interview with too, because now I've just been thinking about it, and it's like, and I do just appreciate cannabis so much. Like, I think it has improved my life in a lot of ways. Yeah,
that's awesome to hear. So thank you to cannabis. Thank you to Nik for being my guest on this podcast.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And any last words from you?
No, just thanks, man. It's been fun. I love being interviewed. It's cool. I've done a fair amount of being on the other side, and it's nice. And thank you. That was great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so in the next episode, to my listeners, hopefully you will be hearing another interview. At the time of recording this, I have not even scheduled one. I've been sending out some messages, but it's, some people don't necessarily want to talk about this. But we'll find one. We'll get you new content soon. And then I need a sign off. I'll figure something out.
Until next time, Captain 420. You don't have to use that.
I want to get the phrase "when I'm high" in there, which is the name of the podcast.
There you go.
And so it's something like, until next time, you will hear more people use the phrase "when I'm high." Oh, that's terrible. Anyway, maybe I'll just record something else afterwards. But if I don't, thank you all for listening. And until next time, this is Spencer signing off from the podcast "When I'm High."
I'm Nik Harter. Bye.